So we got Sutliff, Duke Albert. It's a little match of Prince Albert by Sutliff. I think it's great. I've actually never smoked the actual Prince Albert. I think it's some Dominican company or something. If you look it up on tobacco reviews, you'll see that it's not, certainly not Sutliff who makes the actual branded Prince Albert. This pipe is a little strange. It's a Meerschaum Stummel that I was given by MBSD Pipes. So I bought a bunch of these Stummels. Here's one of the Stummels. So I'll show this pipe later. But this Stummel is just a Stummel, no stem, right? And MBSD gave me a bunch of old stems too, just, you know, old stems from all over the place. Whole box of them, which is really nice. So that's what I've been doing, is just repurposing these guys and just sticking stems on them, etc. And it's kind of janky. Like, I feel like it's janky when I'm doing, to some degree, but I also feel like they just make kind of great smokers. It's a mirror, right? So just immediately smokes right. And I think it's true. A lot of people say that an old Meerschaum, you know, it's obviously not going to have the kind of porosity. The mirror itself, if I think of it as like a matrix, like a sponge, it's going to have so much nicotine and juices that have been collecting in it for years that it's not going to have the same porosity. It's not going to be able to suck in moisture, etc. So, you know, supposedly it's going to smoke worse, right? But I don't see it that way. I just don't. Like, for some reason, I'm always reaching for these old, quote unquote, just nasty old mirrors, quote unquote. Like this one that actually came to me. I bought this online somewhere, I forget exactly where, on eBay. But this already had a steel shank in it. So it's a steel shank, steel tube inside the shank itself, inside the mirror shank, and it goes all the way to the base of the bowl. So you can actually see a little bit of metal poking out, and it actually acts as its own little tenon. So it's a tenon that sticks out of the actual shank. And then this stem, I just had to drill the correct hole size and just stick it on. You know, just have it fit perfectly. Use beeswax, of course. Should probably just remove it. I don't know, it's a little cold. I don't want to do it. But it's neat. You know, you can put a metal shank in it. And I seem to never have issues with metal shanks. I'd always thought, you know, metal shank, you're going to get condensation building up in there, right? I don't seem to have that issue at all. I don't know what that is. I always think that it's going to gurgle, but it doesn't gurgle. And I have a brand new mirror that I didn't bring here, but a brand new Meerschaum, block Meerschaum. It's obviously actual block Meerschaum, and it gurgles. So I don't know what, I think it's one of those things where as I continue to go through just tons and tons of pipes, you know, I'll go and like restore this pipe, for example, this Amphora Extra. This one's actually made in the United States, in Sparta, in the US, rather than in Holland. And sometimes they gurgle, sometimes they don't, and I don't. To me, it's not like a precise science, because I don't know exactly what the variables are that cause the gurgle, unfortunately. But I do love this blend. And I've actually smoked Carter Hall, so the real Carter Hall, not a match of any kind. And I find it very similar. So it's to me, it's similar enough that I wouldn't go reaching for a jar of Carter Hall and think, oh yeah, I want Carter Hall this time. So maybe I don't have the minute, detailed, oriented taste buds yet. But for now, the Sutliff variant, it's like $2.50, something really cheap like that on most sites. I'm going with that one so far. So with this pipe, I'm going to remove this a little carefully, a little bit. So inside of here is a steel shank, or steel tubing inside the shank, I should say, something like that. It's essentially a steel tenon also, so it actually sticks into the mortise. The mortise is actually an old Delrin tenon that was simply left inside of there, and it just got chopped off. So it's, I don't know how to explain. I know exactly what happened there. It seems like there's some kind of either just a standard stem just hitting. Probably not the case. I think it's actually a threaded, where it threads into the Meerschaum, and that material is left there. So I thought, you know, I can go through the process of like boring that stuff out if I want to, or I could essentially just fill it with CA glue, which is super glue, use accelerant to just fill in as much as I can, and then to drill a new hole. So that's essentially what I did. Just had to use enough accelerant to fill it up. So it's just kind of, I know it's crudely filled up, and then I went and drilled it. So it has a perfect at least perfect enough mortise there. So that way I can stick the steel shank in there. And then the stem, this vulcanite stem, is attached, of course, to the steel rod also in its own tenon and mortise. So it kind of has a dual tenon mortise setup going on. But the vulcanite shank side is a lot tighter. So if I twist this, it just removes as if this is both one piece. So I don't want to glue it right now. I don't really have any reason to. I just feel like it's okay to just leave it to be able to function a little more as something that's openly customizable in the future, you know. And this little bamboo piece I bought from Vermont Freehand. They had tons of little bamboo pieces, of course, but what I noticed is they don't seem to have this really thin. This is actually from a Rattray's thin caber tamp that I used to use. But I lost the little metal pokey part of the tamp, which I really like to use a lot. So, guess I am not going to use that tamp anymore, so I decided to drill a little bit larger hole through it. And what I have inside of it is an aluminum shank. So the aluminum version of this metal shank, insides, guts, whatever you want to call it. I think it has a very slightly smaller smaller hole. This is what it felt like to me. But that's what I've been doing so far, is even with this pipe too, in the inside of the shank here is a Delrin push-pull tenon style mortise. And it's just been simply screwed in. I just had to sand it off quite a bit, so do a little bit of changes to it, edits to it, and it turns into this very interesting, I like to call the poor man's Altinai. So if you ever look up Altinai, A-L-T-I-N-A-Y, they're Meerschams. It'll be like $400, $300, very expensive Meerschams that oftentimes use bamboo. And it seems like bamboo just has that kind of eye-catching allure to it, you know, even though a lot of people, I think, they don't like it. They don't like the look of it. I personally thought it looked a little bit stereotypical if I was smoking out of a bamboo pipe, but things change and preferences, I'd say, grow, perhaps. I like how when I hold this, my finger's like this. It's kind of a nice little, that node there I can hold on to, which is nice. And I used to think, you know, maybe it'd be annoying to have these little nodes, but I can actually hold on to the nodes themselves. It's kind of nice, kind of neat, kind of an interesting aspect that I do not dislike. It just smokes beautifully. I have no issues with it so far. This is the christening smoke. Now obviously I'm taking a video, so I'm not focusing on the pipe itself that much, but I do notice a lot of people, when they hold their pipes, they hold it like this, and they completely cover the stumble. And I always think with a pipe, I think the focal point is the stumble. That's where people care about, that's what people look at. So I'd like to be able to hold it in a way that kind of points the focal point out. Same way in a painting, you might have a focal point or a place you want your eye to go to. So a place that your eye starts, maybe it trails over to here and it ends over there, that kind of a thing. But it's probably overthinking it. Or maybe it's a fun little detail. Yeah, I do just love to hold this, like so, with my arm resting on something. My finger holding like this, so it has the most length I can get out of it. You can fit in my mouth a lot easier that way, especially if I'm driving. But, you know, this past month or so, this past 2 months, I've just been doing lots of little restorations. It's like this is another one of these Amphora Holland pipes. I have tons of Amphora pipes right now. For some reason, I'm just looking around at Amphora pipes. They're always really priced cheap. These Holland-made ones, so these, I don't know, what should I call them, Belgian? I don't know exactly where the factory is, but this is, I actually don't even know what this is. It's a Hilson. So it's a Hilson Mercury. So Hilsons, I've just seen here and there every once in a while, but I don't see very much of them. This one's made in Holland, of course, like all of the Hilsons, in the Goebbels factory, G-U-B-B-E-L-S, Goebbels. I don't know exactly how you're supposed to pronounce that, but I think they're really nice smokers. And I think that they probably have a quality that's similar to most GBDs. It's kind of what I see so far. And they have a lot of these, just your typical Anglo-French shapes. So lumberman, or wait, no, this is So Lumberman, I always forget, is it the Lumberman or the Canadian that has the taper stem? I think it's a Canadian that has this taper stem rather than a saddle stem. But these have been my restorations. This one I haven't smoked. Same thing with this Hilson. And I've been trying to sell these on eBay. And of course, I don't get very many hits on them so far. So I think that might be kind of a long-term thing where I have to put them on there for a really long time. I don't know. I've been trying to use social media. I'm obviously on Instagram way more than this YouTube thing. I don't really do YouTube much at all. Unfortunately, I don't even really watch YouTube all that much, which is also not the best. But here's yet another Amphora Extra pipe made in Holland. And of course, these Amphora Extras used to come with like a large shipment of tobacco. So if you buy a lot of tobacco from Amphora, I believe they would send you an Amphora pipe or multiple. Don't exactly know, but that's kind of the legend, I guess. You can look that up on Pipedia. This one, of course, is white in the bowl because I filled it with a little bit of plaster of Paris, which is a food-grade gypsum, similar to what's used with corn cobs. And I usually use that to fill in little cracks and divots, etc. in the bowl so far. And I haven't been doing any kind of bowl coating after that because, you know, I think people want to see inside for the most part. Who knows? That's what I was thinking about keeping, but I don't know. Not that much of a fan of the square shape, but it is iconic. And this top, which looks almost like a pseudo shield pipe, which I believe Dunhill had their shield models at some point where they had almost 2 levels, like a cutout level on their bowl, top of their bowl. But this one just had so much burnout, they just decided to try doing that, see what it looks like. And it's kind of fun, but I don't know. Maybe someone will like it, who knows? Of course, all these, like this one, I had to rebuild the stem on. So the majority of these I had to rebuild the stem. This one is chopped off, and of course use that CA glue and accelerant. And as you can see, I've been slotting my stems the way you're supposed to, a V-cut slot. So the V I've been doing pretty deep, at least 1 centimeter deep, which I think a lot of people like. I noticed a lot of people, I don't think people know about the V-cut that much. I don't know, it just seems like there is... Seems like for pipe makers it's obvious, you know, you got a V-cut funnel those things. But me as just a consumer, when I puff on this pipe and I have my tongue really close to the button, what I can do is actually I can feel the air coming out of it. So with a V-cut, an actual truly V-cut, like this one is about 1 inch V-cut that I cut in. This stem too used to be about this long. It was all cracked up and broken, someone had just chewed the shit out of it. And now it's this kind of it looks like a standard stem, which is nice. But this one too, I had to V-cut in. So I used a Dremel to cut into it basically, and after that I used a file to just do the kind of fine work of cutting it into this little square on the end, a V on the inside. But what I can feel with my tongue is I can feel almost like a block of air, so a square of air. And if I have any pipe, do I even have a pipe in here? I don't. But let's just pretend that one of these pipes had just a simple hole. So it's just a complete hole, has no slot basically, and do the same thing and I puff like this. I can feel on my tongue a very small pinpoint of air hitting my tongue. So the idea is that it disperses out the air before it even goes into your mouth. So that way by the time it gets close to your tongue, it's been dispersed out. And for tongue bite, you usually want to have, of course, as much smoke dispersed out as possible to begin with, so that way you don't have one single pinpoint area that the smoke's hitting. It's kind of the idea or the, I don't know, the essence, what people are trying to do, the aim at least. If the variable you're having an issue with is tongue bite, then perhaps the variable of a V-cut, adding that V-cut to your stem, or widening the V-cut, which you can also do. You can make them a little wider so they're more dispersed. You can change the variable of having tongue bite. And the technique you use is cutting into it using files. And I guess for me, Dremel. Dremel's really quick. Dremel into there, file to do the rest of the work, basically. I think smokes so great. It's just, and I can get it to clench perfectly because I can bend it right into the position I want. It's a little too bent at first. I've noticed the bend starts a little too close to the bite zone here. So it starts, let's say the bend starts here and it just kind of aggressively bends out this way. It's going to interact with my mouth. I don't like that. But if it's mostly straight and then it starts bending, then it doesn't interact with my mouth. my lip actually, and I kind of like it a little better that way. So of course I'm just rambling here, 15-minute mark here, but I'll show a couple more pipes that I've been working on. So this is the M4 Extra. That's kind of one of my first pipes that I bought. It might have been my first or my second estate pipes. And I keep thinking about getting rid of it and selling it, but I think right now I'll keep it because its shape is a little bit unusual. I just don't see really large. This is almost a cutty or a tavern pipe shape, a Belgique, without that little end on it, which I do like. I wish I could find something like that. I love those briars that look just like a tavern pipe. But this one too, you know, I've been rebuilding the stem. This one I also gave it a funnel stem. It was one of my first funnels, so I didn't do a very good job on it, but it did funnel out. It doesn't have very much material for me to do it with. This pipe, I just finished, and I think I'll try selling it to my friend if he wants to, my friend Kyle, who's interested in smoking pipes. So this was my first tenon turning experiment. So I bought a tenon turning tool on Vermont Freehand. If you look Vermont Freehand up and you type in tenon turning tool, you'll find this little tool that you can use to turn a tenon, and it's very janky. It doesn't work very well. You know, obviously using a lathe I think would be much better, but it worked kind of. See, there's kind of an issue there, and I think I'll obviously be able to sell this to him at quite a discount, and once I get better at this, I think I can probably give him a better stem for it. But as you can tell, when I first put it in, it doesn't start to, doesn't have any pressure built up. And it only builds up pressure and grips onto it at the very end. So probably means that there needs to be more material further toward the end of the tenon, which is not the best, but who knows. But you can see it looks kind of nice, I think. It looks very Danish because it's got a kind of Danish-esque stem. It has a giant-ass bowl. This is really huge. So Kyle's a fan of Gurkha cigars, and I thought, hey, you know, this is kind of, to me, it has some kind of rustication on it. It looks kind of badass, hopefully. And I put these little slashy marks on it. And I don't know if that's just awkward or a selling point. I can't really tell. You know, a lot of people, a lot of like dirty hipsters, you know, some dumb kids will just buy vintage clothing and they'll kind of reupholster it, or they'll apply things to it, they'll add things to it, they'll change it up, and then they'll sell it as kind of added value. Maybe that's what I'm doing here. I'm basically doing a very rudimentary version of repurposing and hopefully adding a bit of a style or spin to things to make them a little sellable. I don't know. A little more interesting. I hope I'm not just looking at this with just, will they sell in mind, even though I'm not really making any money off of this stuff. But I like it. I like this pipe. I think I might keep it. Who knows? It's kind of neat. I've just been really cycling through pipes a lot because I keep buying more and keep selling more. The ones I keep seem to either be ones that I really like, but the ones I sell usually are ones that have very sellable names, like Peterson, Nordy, you know, Stanwell. Those pipes get sold really quickly because they have very recognizable names. GBD, that pipe will be on there for like a week. I can ask a bit of a premium for them, so why not just sell it, you know? Because it seems I'm a little more interested in very kind of obscure pipe brands, pipe makes. Just strange finds like this one. It never bites. This one never bites for me. Duke Albert. A little chocolatey, but not too chocolatey on the tin note, which is good because Edgeworth Ready Rubbed was way too chocolatey on the tin note. Let's see what else do I have here. This one, I think I'll sell because it has too much bend at the stummel. So I've noticed when the stummel has too much bend, then no matter how straight I make the stem, it just ends up interacting with my chest. in my clothing, things like this. So I'm always wearing stuff around my neck, so I'm always really cold. And I like the skater shape, for the most part, but I think this one's just in too good condition. This one came with a very chewed up stem, so whoever had it just chewed the shit out of the stem, but I rebuilt it, and it seems pretty well rebuilt for the most part. But I think it's just too nice looking. The stamping is just perfect condition, so I think it'll be probably a better pipe to sell. That's the thing, I don't know how much you can get for these things. I mean, I'm thinking maybe like 35 bucks most, it seems like. It seems like this was not a good idea to buy this for, what did I pay, maybe $20 with tax. And I refurb it, put a whole bunch of work into it, restain it, and I might get 35 minus fees, etc. So I'm making like $7 off this thing. Maybe that's not really a good use of time, but it was fun. It was a fun little project and it gave me experience. Yet another Amphora Holland pipe. Kept finding these. Black stain, completely unsellable. I don't think anyone's looking for a pipe like this because you can just you can get like a Rossi Notte, N-O-T-T-E, Rossi pipe that looks essentially exactly the same for like 45 bucks, brand new, anywhere. So I'm thinking I'll have to do something with these to make them kind of, interesting. With this one, I think what I'll probably have to do is sand off the bowl so the bowl's exposed briar. And maybe I can actually I've been adding like small sterling silver what do you call them? Accents, basically, like a really small dot of sterling silver, which I can place in there by using essentially small pieces of jewelry. And it seems like that's kind of a selling point. I've done it in the past, and that one sold really quickly. So I think it's something that'll just make it it'll stick out. It'll make it kind of unusual and interesting and unique, which it seems like uniqueness is pretty good way to sell these things sometimes. And hopefully it's actual value added and not just me screwing it up, making it look kind of gaudy, giving it unnecessary details. Clench is fantastic. Now maybe I'll start up this one. It's filled with PS whatever. It's Optimum. Peter Stokkebye's Optimum. This one I did a bit of an edit to the stem. The story on the stem is that it came from a horrible pipe, just horribly destroyed, disfigured. Yeah, a crack that went all the way through the bowl, essentially. It's like barely holding on. It had been smoked to high heaven, and the stem was just completely filled with, gunk. So whoever was smoking it probably was just sticking like a piece of metal through it or something just to try to like dislodge it. I don't know. I think it clenches so nice and it's long. I can drive. I've been driving with this thing. It just straight out like a Gandalf length pipe that you can just clench just so easily, This thing is it's so thin. Look at the material. It's incredibly thin. This is actually even thinner Meerschaum. But what is this, like 5 millimeters thickness for the majority of it? So it's very, very minimal material usage in the Stemless. And that's like just spot on for me. That's what I look for because it's a Meerschaum, right? You don't care about burnout. You're not going to get burnout. It's an old Meerschaum, so what's the point of having more material? It's not going to soak up anymore. It's basically a clay pipe, or it's like a porcelain pipe at this point. But it's incredibly light because it doesn't have much material in it. That's what I like about these like cheap, smaller Meerschaum pipes. Like to me, it defeats the purpose of having a big, like I've smoked big Meerschaum pipes before. And to me, it's marginal. The amount of moisture it wicks up, it's very marginal, very small compared to, and I don't know, and I smoke mostly dry blends anyway. I live in a very dry environment, so I don't really need to be pulling that much moisture out of it. So I don't I'll pick up 9mm pipes very much. Like I'll do it because I like all of my 9mm. But I find it's almost it's not something that I look forward to, like, oh, I'll finally be able to smoke a 9mm pipe. But I do enjoy kind of these sweeter, lighter aromatics like PS whatever, Peter Stokkebye's Optimum, in these mirrors. And I think it almost like ghosts the pipe in a nice way. Like I enjoy the ghost that it produces. A lot of these mirrors. You see that? See? Like different places, different nodes where I can hold. So it's very ergonomic. To me, at least. I'm sitting in my car. It's not really lighting, by the way. Let's see what's going on here. So we're at the 25-minute mark here. I've explained some of the pipes I've been working on, some of my projects. I'm obviously much more active on Instagram, unfortunately. So not much on YouTube, but I'll throw this out right now. But I've been working on, at least in my head at least, kind of writing this stuff out. But when you used to teach martial arts, there's kind of this like pedagogical process. Like how do you teach effectively, essentially? And like what kind of methods will you be able to teach stuff easier with? Like what methods do you use? And I think with new pipe smokers, there's just these issues that people run into, these problems. And it's not very many, I think. It's almost always like tongue bite. It's a big thing. My damn pipe won't stay lit is another thing. And clench. You know, hurts to clench. There's other like minor stuff. Like I keep burning my fingers. Like I talk to a lot of people and I say like, hey, yeah, remember like when you used to burn your thumb? You're trying to light things and you like burn your thumb, etc. That's also a common thing. I've also talked to cigar smokers and asked them, did you ever try smoking a pipe? And these kind of 4 main things seem to pop up. I think there's more. I should probably think about what they are. But I think these are, let's just call these variables. So these are kind of variables that are not working. Like, my damn pipe won't stay lit means the variable of how readily your tobacco is going to stay lit. That variable's off. So an experienced pipe smoker will give them, they'll give them a technique, you know, like, you know, you should dry your tobacco out more. So that's one technique. And another person will say, oh no, what you should do is you should pack it differently. Another person will say, oh no, you have to tamp it more. Another person will say, oh no, you have to add more white ash you have to add like cigar ash to the top of it or something. And these are all different techniques and they change the end variable. But for a new pipe smoker, first off, they don't know very many techniques and they don't know the cause and effect very well. So they don't know if I have a pipe that won't stay lit, then if I change the variable of how I pack it, then that will change. How will that affect the variable I'm trying to in the end resolve? I'm trying to make it stay lit longer. So I think it's kind of nice to have almost all that stuff compiled. So have a really big list of techniques and show how they change a variable and how they change the end variable that you're trying to fix usually. And kind of neat, almost like a web. A cause and effect web. So that way you can ask a question to this web, this little tree of information. And you can tell it, I get tongue bite, so my tongue hurts really bad. And in order to change that variable, what do I do? And then that tree will tell you, well, if you have tongue bite, there's a couple different things you can do. You can change the moisture content in your tobacco. And here is the technique you use to change that. So you dry your tobacco out more. You can use 9mm filters. To me, it doesn't really work very well, but you know, that's an option. And there's other techniques that you can use to change different variables that change your end variable. So variable, technique, variable. It seems kind of like you can probably compile that stuff together. And what you can end up with is almost like an AI or some kind of a guru. You know, you ask this AI system or you ask this guru, you know, I have this issue with my pipe. And they do. And they'll give you the techniques, but also they'll give you, hopefully, the aspects of the technique that most people can't really write down in one little comment on YouTube or can't really just tell you right up front. Like with drying tobacco out. There's aspects of drying tobacco that I just never thought about. Like I remember, I've talked to people about drying tobacco out a lot. And usually what they say is they come from the cigar world and they're afraid that they're going to dry out their tobacco too much because they'll screw it up. Because with cigars, you know, you dry them out too much, screws them up, like they don't smoke right. Like it'll actually change the shape of the cigar itself, etc. So I didn't really know that. And it seems to me that oftentimes what a new pipe smoker has to do is they have to really go to the extremes. So they have to dry it out extremely too much. Dry it out to the point that essentially your leaves will just crumble if you touch them. You know, if you squeeze them together, they start crumbling and falling apart. And so they don't really know. They just don't know that kind of extreme. So it seems like what I try to do is I try to say, hey, like take your pipe tobacco that you think's just not smoking for you very well And it's just probably 1 ounce, you know, take 1 ounce of it and just break it into thirds. Dry one out to the point that it just dries completely. It's just falling apart, flaking apart, and just try smoking that anyway. And even assure them that's not going to mess up your experience that much, you know. I used to think that if I dry out my tobacco too much, it might give me a crazy nick hit or something. I just kind of thought that might be the case. No one ever told me that, but I just imagined it. And so, and essentially, I think what you can do is you can kind of tell them, for the technique part of what I'm explaining, how to exaggerate their techniques. So exaggerate to one side or the other. Try just doing way too dry, and have another one where it's wet enough that when you squeeze it, it takes a little while for the spongy wetness for it to come back. And when you touch it, you can actually feel the moisture in the tobacco, have something that's in between. So we have extremes, have something in between, and that way they can figure out for themselves what they want to do without the fear of kind of wondering, will this just really screw up my experience? Will I be wasting tobacco, etc.? So I don't know, it seems like that's kind of a way I've just been thinking is it might be a nice kind of fun little way to kind of explore that. Maybe I can learn more stuff too. Maybe I can learn more techniques. For example, I heard a technique recently about dumping cigar ash into the top of a new bowl, and it didn't really piece together that that's what that white ash does. Like the white ash that builds up when you do a charring light is essentially what's going to help keep the pipe lit. And I never really considered that all that much. And it started to make me think about how I dump out ash. And I've been purposely trying to dump out more ash on blends that I feel like are burning too hot. So I'm using how much ash there is as a variable that changes that variable of how much ash there is what changes the variable of how hot it smokes. So it's kind of, I can have the cause and effect really clearly there and have another technique to affect it other than just puffing on it more or less or drying it out, you know, less or more. Obviously drying out your tobacco is something that you can't do in real time when you have a pipe lit in your mouth and you're driving around or you're walking around, etc. So it's been 31 minutes. I've explained kind of this interesting little pedagogical, how do you teach things kind of discussion that I've been having with myself. I've shown you this, what I think is a kind of cool pipe. A little bamboo piece on it. This one too. Just wouldn't stay lit. I wonder why. Well, I'm going to go now and actually enjoy this rather than just record a video. Have a good one. Bye.